the things that I've made a commitment to do is to leave this industry better than it was when I got here.
Wow.
So it's the initiatives and the projects that I work on to help move the needle that are most important to me.
Okay, y'all brought it up. We talked about COVID. We talked about really the summer of 2020. It was a moment. If you take away COVID and the fact that, yes, it had the value of making us pause and sit because time kind of slowed down, that's not the first time we've seen injustice on a screen, especially concerning people of color, right? What else was different about that moment that started such a conversation outside of COVID?
I don't know that you can actually take the two apart because what's so unique about the George Floyd situation is the fact that everybody had to watch it. We've seen those things on screen before, never to that extent. At least I had never seen it to that extent. I'd never seen a man die on television.
In the position.
In that
Position, correct. Everybody, because of the news cycle, because it was on every channel, and because people were playing it from start to finish, had to watch it. If you didn't watch it, you didn't watch it because you chose not to look at television. And you didn't want to confront that. But everybody, a lot of people, many more people that had watched people get shot by police in communities of color prior to this event, watched George Floyd die. And that was what was unique about this particular instance.
The social media, this was a global phenomenon. Not like we've seen it in America, and we could always sweep it under the rug in America, but we saw other countries seeing the same thing. That was different.
I think a moment like that intersects every single domain of life, every single one of them. Your home, your friendships. What ways did it find itself in our industry? There are a lot of people that were committed to saying this is wrong, but they asked me a ton of questions. What kind of questions did you get? What ways did you help foster understanding in a moment like that?
I would say in my company, our CEO personally reached out to, some of us just to get our take on it and our experience in commercial real estate, because they don't realize, there's a difference from somebody that is a part of the marginalized community versus them, and you sharing your story. And I will tell you that I was uncomfortable, initially. You're like, well, wait a minute, do you really want to know my story? And when I tell you this, is there going to be some judgment there about what I'm sharing with you? But got a call from our CEO, call from my CIO, call from peers that were like, what can I do? Oh, I'd never heard of the term anti-racist, and help me understand, all of this, because I care. And we even had those discussions at the asset management level with our CIO, who was just like, I'm very sorry, I don't understand this. And it was a really authentic conversation. And we followed up with that with one-on-ones.
People called, reached out. They wanted to get a sense of, how I felt. I said, this is something that I'm numb to at this point, because it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time. But I appreciate you calling to check on me. My question is, how does this impact you? I'd like to know, do you see that, we're not just, this is not a joke. This is not something that people are making up. Yeah. And I think one of the challenges that I had was, I asked a simple question. I said, when you get pulled over by the police, and I'm talking to someone who's not black, do you fear that this could ever end with your life being over? Has it ever entered your mind one time when you got pulled over by the police? And the answer is always no. I said, that is always a concern of mine. And I have been taught, I have been conditioned to how to interact with the police when I get pulled over. You know, that's something as an African American, especially a male, you know, we have to be concerned with, because that's something that's unfortunate. I had to teach my son that. Yeah. And, you know, that's something that unfortunately I had to teach my son. Because, you know, you just don't know it. You know, I think about some of my midnight drives from Houston to Dallas. I always stayed on the phone with someone. You know, this is where I am. You know, I may have gotten pulled over. Yeah, I was speeding. But, you know, it was one of those things that I made sure I had, you know, my license, insurance, everything was in order. Lights were on inside the car. You know, windows rolled down. You know, it's the drill. Yeah. And I just don't think our counterparts have an appreciation for why we need to do that. Sure. They don't necessarily have to. So, you know, it's just so we don't end up.
And it's, you truly, when you're having those conversations, letting them know the starkly contrasting ways we grew up, right? Mm-hmm. The protocols, like our fire drills are different than your fire drills, right? Like all of what y'all are talking about. You know, one, it made the conversation necessary for us to like peel that back and show them this is exactly what has to happen to me that has never happened to you. Right. I felt for the first time people were like, their mouths were open and they were like, wow, like really? That's your lived experience? Mm-hmm. Every time you get pulled over, that's your lived experience? And the way it translates even into commercial real estate is there are times when even the stereotype threat of how do you see me, client? How do you see me, CEO? How do you see me, colleague? How do you see me, client that I'm pitching business to? Mm-hmm. These are things that I'm thinking about that you don't have to. Right? And it's helping build a bridge of understanding. And I really feel like this moment in the summer of 2020, not only was the conversation necessary, but people were receptive. Right. They were receptive. Diversity is how a room looks, right? It can either be diverse or not. Mm-hmm. Inclusion is how somebody feels when they're in it. As far as commercial real estate is concerned, as far as your industry, your company is concerned, what ways have you felt accepted and embraced by a not so diverse industry?
My experience in terms of being offered grace depending on a certain situation that may occur, I didn't get that same level as somebody else would. So I've had challenges in that respect, from as a VP and more senior exec in the asset management field. With my company today, I think they do a very good job of doing that. Now, statistics are relative. You know, you think about we're are pretty diverse in comparison to other companies I've been in who have Black individuals at senior executive level roles.
For the first time in 2020, it hit me that we truly are pioneering in this industry with respect to trying to get people to be inclusive, to cultivate diversity, to think about equity. These are all things we grew up learning, but for the first time in 2020, when I'm the only one in the room that's Black, I was like, wait, like what I say actually carries weight right now. Mm-hmm. Like I'm actually being asked questions by the CEO of the company, just like you guys have shared. Mm-hmm. What I get to say next is incredibly meaningful. So for me, I was like, wow, wait, this is a moment. This is a moment.
And I would say when we first started the DEI Council, at first I was thinking, I've got a lot on my plate, and someone that was leading the charge for setting up this racial equity institute workshop.
Okay.
She was leaving. I was like, hey, Camille, I need you to kind of take the lead on making sure everything goes well with this workshop we're putting on in August. And then after that, it was, we need this council. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to step up because I need to make sure that we can affect change in the right and meaningful way, and sort of push the envelope of presenting everything that I felt we needed to do, which was, the first thing was, you know, you had diversity and inclusion was the first, has been what we've heard all along. And I'm like, I'm doing this research. The first things first, we need to change this name, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And let's make sure we start there and really kind of get into these discussions that might make us uncomfortable. But we're gonna share this with the executives and try to get them on board. Not try to, it's not that they wouldn't be, but it's up to us to ensure that we are sending the right message and that we're bringing in the appropriate resources to make all this stuff happen, whether it's partnering with Project Destined or Project Reap, and mentoring and ensuring that we put our jobs out there, and just coming up with a list of goals to just make sure we get all of those things happening and bring in the right interns. And again, I think people get hung up on, we're just trying to hire somebody from the HBCU or just picking somebody in. And we've always said it is a qualified candidate. You cannot say, I can't find them. They are out there. You have to be intentional about going through to those particular channels and making sure that we've got those postings out there and that we're getting the results that we're getting so that we can get those folks in.
We as an industry, we have deliberately created a system that benefits a certain group of people. And we have to be really, really deliberate and intentional about what we do going forward to fix it. And so, you know, a lot of people wonder why there's quotas or there's goals associated with the hiring of minorities into this industry. Well, it's simple, because we have to be intentional about fixing an issue that we created ourselves, right? Go back to your story. It is crazy that you felt the need to go back to get an MBA to impress someone in this industry enough to hire you that probably, just statistically, did not have an MBA. Right? I was talking to a colleague of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, hey, so how did you get your start in this business? He works in capital markets. One of the things that he told me was, you know, I had to be, he's a former athlete. He didn't want to go down that route. He had opportunities to do other things with this college. And he was really interested in commercial real estate. But one of the things that he did before getting into the industry was get his MBA, get his Series 7. He literally made it to where they did not have a choice but to hire him. And it's unfortunate that we have to feel like we have to be 4 times better than the next applicant to get an opportunity in this business.
You mentioned it's a responsibility. Like the people, we have a responsibility that it's on my shoulders. And one thing my mantra has been since 2018 is courage. You have to be a brave heart. We're in an environment, we're in the lion's den. There's no room for turning back. There's no room for compromising my integrity in this space. And I think that's what helps continue to push it along. That's what gets the respect. That's what gets other African Americans to say, hey, I want to be in that position. But I see a lot of cowards in our industry that look like us too, and that's got to change. You know, this is real deal that we gotta make.
You gotta be willing
happen.
to push on something.
You gotta be willing.
Yeah.
You got to.
You gotta be willing to push on something. We gotta use our influence to change what we're seeing as the issue. So what did you push on? What did you press on? How did you use your influence in one way or two ways? How did you use your influence, especially during this time coming off of 2020? What did you do? What was meaningful?
So one of the things that I've done with JLL, and by the way, I should say, you know, JLL has been awesome to work for during this entire last 18 months. And here's what I will give them credit for. I think our leaders have made it possible for me to feel comfortable holding people accountable. It's very interesting when I get the opportunity to offer advice and talk to people on the other side of the phone that are looking for an internship in commercial real estate that look like me, or that are in underrepresented categories, right? And a lot of what I do is just kind of offer advice and help them understand what the internship will entail, help them with what they might be asked in the next process, in the next interview in the process. And it brings me a great amount of joy to see the looks on their face when they see someone on the other side that doesn't look like what they thought he would look like, and has essentially in their eyes made it in this industry, right?
And even if it's unspoken, you can see that moment.
That's been very,
I love that.
very rewarding.
You can see that moment. I love that.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
And I'm also, you know, I'm also creating another legacy in this business. So my daughter is a agency leasing representative with JLL. She's last year she graduated from UNT with a finance and real estate degree. And so I am looking forward to watching her grow in this business, which is another reason behind the motivation for me to leave it better.
Absolutely. Because she's coming right in that door behind you.
Right.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I saw that post on LinkedIn. That was special.
What other ways have you meaningfully pushed and used your influence to help make a way for somebody else behind you?
I'm mentoring a young guy right now going to Howard. I've also mentored two guys that were over at SMU. And what I try to do is give them an action plan that they need to go out and execute and not just go to class. And it was so many things that one's an undergrad, two are in the MBA program at SMU. You know, the first thing I told them to do is I said, you know, class is secondary to your networking, believe it or not. I said, you have to get out and meet people and you need to make it an active thing. And I gave them an action step. You call up a head of a company, a CEO or someone, you ask them for 30 minutes of their time and you go in with 10 questions and you take a notepad, and they were surprised at how much feedback they got. They were automatically on a radar that they never even thought about. So it's little things like that, being involved in organizations, in grad schools, the Black Business Students Association, and being part of the National Black MBA Conference and attending those events and encouraging people that I come across to get involved. They're looking for you in some aspects and you need to be present.
I'll just hover on you real quick, because the difference between you and us is you have started a company, right? So to you, I mean, mentoring, I'm sure, will play its role in the foundation of some of the things you're doing with your company that you're starting. But what else? How else is DE&I going to show up? We're talking to the co-founder. How is it going to show up at a company you are leading?
It has to be something that I carry every day when I go to meet with someone. It has to be something that impacts a community that I came from and it looks like. I am diversity. I want to be included. And finding the partnerships and the right relationships with, whether it's a public entity, a private equity group, bringing them to an area that they're not necessarily paying attention to and helping them understand the financial benefits.
With the ULI, Urban Land Institute, I'm also a member of the urban planning. So what they do is we go into high schools, and I'm choosing the high schools in areas in the southern part of the sector, Skyline, Madison, and we're going in and we're teaching kids about community development through a program that they created. So you get to understand all elements of what it takes to bring a project to fruition, whether it's the political side, or it's the finance side, as well as the development and the community interactions. Because we know in our business, development is the top of the food chain. Everything else kind of flows down from there, right? So they make a lot of decisions politically in our communities based on the development decisions that they're making. So having people understand that whole process helps them to understand what they need to do within their community. What institutions need to be in my community for us to have an economic base, for us to have these things, for us to develop our youth. That's the main thing. We don't have institutions developed of our own in our communities, and we don't know what those are. So that's the one thing. We got to learn what those are. What is the banking role? What's the bank's role? What's the government's role?
Sure.
I love being part of, once again, a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And if you grew up in the inner city, but imagine if we could go back and create an affordable housing solution, and we could create a school system and better quality retail in that community.
Mm.
That's your legacy.
Yeah, we can.
And we will. But that's what drew me to this, is that I said, we're not playing checkers.
Right.
We're playing
Yes.
chess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the landscape of real estate, that's the board.
That's the board.
So that excited me the most about
That's
it.
good, man. No, y'all, this has been incredible. Thank y'all so much for taking the time to have a conversation like this. I think we're starting a conversation. We're reflecting. Black History Month is a moment to celebrate the things that we didn't believe could come to pass.
Absolutely.
It's commemorating. It's looking forward and having a hope for the future. So I just appreciate you guys being here, being a part of this conversation, hearing the different hills you guys are taking, and even feeling that we're going to take hills together. That's what these moments invariably do. They really make you feel like, man, we are stronger together.
Absolutely.
And our voices are louder, more compelling, and more influential when we shout at the same time. So I love this. This is great. Thank y'all so much for being here.